a quick summary for all of you. One, Ava started us off talking about civic, social media, some community types, archetypes, and dimensions of those. Rich was talking about, with some very government slides, about the plan for DPI at Mayamzansi in South Africa. And Jan and Quentin talked a lot about openness, or the lack thereof, in the Netherlands, and how that is affecting people's lives. And so I know we have questions from Slido, and so I would like to go through those, one for each of you. I know we have a few floating around, so upvote if you haven't. And the first one is for you, Ava. Have you seen any examples of online communities facilitating productive political discourse? The productive is carrying a lot of weight in that question. And any specific design suggestions for that if you have seen it? And feel free to take the mic there next to you. You can each take your own mic. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel a bit unprepared for this question at this conference, I have to say, because the archetype of communities of debate is one which very much came more from external inspiration rather than like the actual work that we've done. But maybe besides the examples that are already present at this conference, an interesting smaller example is Podwalks in the Netherlands, which is like it's from a media organization it's basically media which they make episodes about local areas or the histories of local areas, and then people go on walks to basically listen to these stories while they're there in the local areas. And this is kind of generated a accidental, very vibrant community of people who want to talk to each other about what they see on these walks, and want to basically engage in discussions around what's happening. I don't know, the thing is, it's very much still in progress, so they're trying to figure out how can we facilitate this more. So I don't know if I have very specific design suggestions, but yeah, it's one thing I'm excited about is these types of conversations that could happen around current issues in response to, let's say, existing media.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll go to the next one on Slido, because as I said, we're gonna have one for each. Lucky for me, the next one is for Jan and Quentin. And so the question is, how do you sustain access to that government data, given all the challenges that you outlined? Should this role eventually be held by government? And how do you, or do you embed government capacity strengthening as a part of that?
Yeah, those are a lot of questions. But first of all, I think our goal is to, because I think the question is, how do you, should this role be eventually held by government? Yes, I agree. It should be. I think there is always a role to play for NGOs because they are neutral or somewhat neutral from government. I think if you look at the deletion of data in the US right now, there's definitely a role to play for NGOs, maybe in the archival sense. But when it comes to disclosing data that is core to the operations of government, yes, they should play a central role. And within our organization, we often say our main goal is to wind down to get to a situation where we're actually not required anymore. So yeah, that's it should be with government for sure.
Great, thank you. And I know we mentioned roles, and I was thinking about all the roles because we have Rich, who's now in government, but formerly TICTeC. We have university, we have NGOs represented here. I think Colin earlier mentioned a big tent for the TICTeC movement, and I think it's important to think about who's in the tent and what roles we play as a part of that. And I'm sure we could have a great discussion about that later on. One question for you, Rich, that I'm gonna pull from the Slido as well. So the top one for you was, learning from the TICTeC space in South Africa, how can government better collaborate with local innovation and research in the digital space?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just to respond to that, don't work yourself out of a job. Work yourself into the next problem. That's I mean, honestly, it's one of the things we learned a lot of. We always say we're gonna work ourselves out of jobs, but we don't, we want jobs. And we should exist in the space. I think in terms of the collaboration with local innovation in South Africa, I mean, it's going to be procurement and the current, I mean, very well captured model globally of how we do tech in government. So I think one of the things that we really want to explore here is how we push open standards and how we allow for collaboration spaces that are governed and legal, but not incredibly slanted towards favoring proprietary tech and big tech and outsourced tech and non-continental tech. I think there's a huge amount around being proactive in our communication and advocacy. So like the idea of, and to the point of not, working in the open actually being better for you in the end, engaging with, especially like law and legal legislation, NGOs, engaging with information access, research groups, engaging with these sorts of things, and building a dialogue that means we can be proactive in our messaging. We can try and have issues up front. I think it's this continual loop of holding back, then being reactive, and then then something comes out in a scandal, and that strangely closes the space more than learning that actually would have been better to be proactive. I mean, there's a lot there. I think also trust. So how we start to build incentives for gov work is to be able to invest in local innovation as opposed to what currently happens. It's a much safer choice to take a big name and use it. How do we equip, and that's the capacity building. How do you build skills inside gov? It's not like you want your whole development community inside government. What you really want is knowledgeable buyers, knowledgeable product owners, people that know how to string together what might seem a little bit more of a raw or kind of rough around the edges space, but one that will be more local and more collaborative. And that's about developing capacity in gov and the risk versus reward profile we put people under, and sort of maybe looking at that. Yeah, there's a couple more, but I'll.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to open the floor to the room if there are any questions. Either side, I'm going to do my own mic running today. So if you have any questions, we have someone to do that. Never mind. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Fernandez, just here. Thank you so much. And you all can tell I used to be a teacher. You just wait long enough. Somebody will ask a question.
Someone's going to break.
Yeah, it's in Slido, but it's top in the down part of it, so I'm going to say. Richard, so the DPI agenda, do you think it's gaining leverage because of the G20 presidency in South Africa? And which opportunities do you see for collaboration within the Global South?
Yeah, I'm also starting to learn. I have to be really careful about what I say. I can't just be like, but yes, it's a blessing and a curse. I think that what we're finding with G20 is a lot of really good focus on us and support, and a lot of people want to say they did something in G20, and so that can also be painful because it brings a very short-termism to it. So you try to make sure you take advantage of that, but not hurt yourself in the long term. There's a lot of pressure from a lot of philanthropy community, other gov community, NGOs to say that was their big thing in G20, And it's been very interesting being and just very recently on the side of government being like, wow, there's a lot of different things to balance. And you want to work with everyone, and so it's about, that is very useful, but also can be tough. But I think in terms of the Global South, I mean, something that we are embarking on, and not just as ourselves, and not just even as South African communities, is this concept of, everyone's talking about stacks, India stack, Era stack, and to hesitate to say the Africa stack, because I don't necessarily know that that's a useful framing. Like, what does it look like for us to localize digital public goods? and in that idea of what long-term impact will be, if we've just replaced a proprietary, West Coast tech vendor with another open source product that we have no local ability to maintain, we've really done nothing. And that seems to be a lot of pressure to do that, to deliver DPI. But if we can, as an African community and Global South community, like learning from Brazil, India, and others, develop local capacity to either localize digital public goods or know when we have to develop our own, and we get support in that, I think there will be the dream of what DPI can do will be realized. But like I say, there's a lot of lessons to learn. These hype cycles like open government, open data, civic tech, DPI. I really hope that within this space we can learn those lessons of not to be too short-termism, how to sustainable, try to build the muscle more in the capabilities than the tech. Let's see.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So this is the last thing that we're going to do to wrap up to make sure that we end on time today and get ourselves out for the last session. I'm going to ask each of you to respond to one question. For those of you that were with me yesterday, it's the same question. You're going to have 15 seconds. I'm going to time you to say your one takeaway from your presentation that you want for the room. And I would also encourage you all outside after this to tackle that last question that's on the top of the Slido, is what kind of lessons do you think we can take from each other, and to talk about that as we go into the break. So that was my vamping to give you time to think of your 15-second response. And so Quentin, I'll start with you and we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway, and it's a bit of boring of what's happening in South Africa, is that we really need to think about data management and not having these silos and all these email inboxes, but actually managing this and treating this as the valuable thing it is, which makes transparency easier, which makes collaboration easier. Government needs to take this more seriously.
Yeah, I think this would be to really flip the frame from closed source, closed information, closed being the standard, to working out in the open and trusting each other. And it sounds very happy vibes, but I think it's actually a very difficult cultural switch to accomplish. But I think that's key.
I would say designing with communities. Not for them when designing civic tech or civic social media, seeing them as agents in the process.
Yeah, my 15 seconds is agree with all that. Let's build together and work in the open.
Amazing. Well, thank you all. Let's join me in a round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you all. We're going into a break, so you have your last break before we all reconvene here for our last session to close TICTeC for this year. So thank you all. We're off to break.